Good to see you this morning. I see there's a few people logging on, getting ready. How did you like that new? I got this new way of setting up the screen before we go live with the little swirly thing. Pretty impressive, huh? As always, just a reminder to folks. Gee, it's morning. I don't think I'm awake yet. Just a reminder to folks to shout out to each other, say hello. It is a beautiful morning out there today. Should be an absolutely spectacular day. A day to, in a sense, spend at least some time together this morning, kind of just pausing and being present for the way in which you construct or explore or wander or through the landscape or peel back the edges to your own spiritual life. I don't claim to gather us together on a Sunday morning to say that we're just going to give you a rigid way forward, but rather just a time to be with kind of the way in which your soul is manifesting itself at this point in our collective lives together, and at this point in your life as well. So it's just important to be together in a moment like this and to reach out to each other and say hello to each other as we start this journey today. A couple of just reflections before we get started today. I obviously I'm back home. My office is being remodeled, so I'm out of there for a while. And behind me are some pictures on the mantle of my old Datsun Roadster, which I'll make reference to today. And you might be able to make it, you might not be able to make it out, but that's what's back there with a small spark of a candle glowing between the photos. So that's back there, just a reminder that that's coming up. And I think I want to start by just saying, I don't feel responsible on a Sunday morning when we get together to come to you all the time with a bunch of like answers or wisdom. And I say that in some ways in good company, because what we know about, particularly from the Christian tradition, and this happens in every religion, is not, the wisdom that is birthed out of every religious tradition does not just pop out of nowhere, right? It just doesn't arrive on the scene, but rather it's constructed or birthed or crafted out from both an individual's pursuit of, if you will, insight or spiritual wisdom or longing or a new set of eyes with which to see the world, a new pair of ears with which to hear neighbor. You can hear all of that particularly in the life of Jesus and other religious key figures throughout history, right? It's not just that they have wisdom to share with us that might help us to guide our way forward, but they were searching, right? They were exploring, they were wondering. And you always have to remember that, the religious life isn't gathering just a set of answers and applying them, but it is an invitation to ask a bunch of questions, to simply be aware or conscious or have this expectation that as you grow in your capacity to see the world or explore the world, that wisdom begins to emerge out from that experience. And that's a little bit what I want to talk to you about today, because I've been, part of my job is to worry about spiritual communities. And I worry even about the spiritual community we've crafted together on Facebook Live, right? I think, is this a valuable experience for people at this point in time to be able to, kind of engage and provide some sense of orientation for our time? And I'm nervous a little bit about what will our lives look like as we begin to come out of this pandemic, now that more and more people are getting vaccinated. In fact, I got an email from a woman today who said, I just can't be there. I'm still sick from my second shot. And my own family members are getting shots. We know that we're going to be coming back together. And so the question in my mind is, how to do that carrying forward all that we've learned and gained and the insights that we've had during this time together. And I've been reading a lot lately and paying attention to a lot of conversations that I think are helping us maybe wonder what that might look like. Let me give you a couple examples. One, Robin Myers just wrote a book about thinking about God. And Robin Myers in that book talks about if we can't construct an idea of God that's different than the old ideas of God that we've had, if we can't come up with new language for the way in which we talk about God or give expression to our relationship to God, all that kind of stuff that we strive to do when we get together on a Sunday morning, if we can't come up with new language, then by default, we just presume the God and the relationship with God that we had before, right? We have to find our way into new language or new ways of imagining who we're in relationship with, and find new ways to do that. And if we don't, then we're just going to continue to perpetuate the old ways, and that's not going to help a religion adapt or the spiritual life adapt to the needs of our day. It's just not. So that's been weighing on my mind. The second thing that's been weighing on my mind is the conversations that have happened in Soul Forum. And Portia entered into these conversations with individuals, and as they came together in those conversations, and I talked to Portia about this, and this will be the next podcast in the series, is that as they came together, something about the space they shared, the moment that they were in conversation, right, sparked something deeply sacred and spiritual for both of them. And Portia noted it too and said, there's just something about coming together, being vulnerable and honest and real together that invites this moment. It's almost like a magical moment. And she said, that's such a deeply spiritual moment. And that idea stuck in my head this week. And then the last idea that kind of came to my mind is I read an article recently about how church might have to find its way into being more like an invitation to just place, where these kind of conversations can happen, rather than the rigidity of proposals. Like you come to church and we make these proposals about how you're supposed to live your life, how you're supposed to think about God. We just give some space for people to be with the questions, to be with the adventure of what it means to be human for our time. And maybe church is an open place like that. That's what I've been thinking about. Now, I don't have the answers of like what that all looks like, but I think these conversations that are happening right now and have been happening for a long time are an invitation to all of us to kind of reimagine how we think about crafting our own spiritual lives going forward. And so 2 proposals today. One is kind of the possibility that what we're really called to do is kind of mind this small space, this small arena that sometimes we have to intentionally craft that can hold the wonder of kind of life's mystery, or the essence of the divine, or the energy of the life force that holds us all together. There's these little moments in time when that can be more present for you. And possibly even time like this morning, is just a holding place, space, a little gap where that wonder can happen for a moment. I hearken back to my old Roadster that's on the wall. I made reference to this before, right? This was the first car I ever owned, was a 1966 Datsun Roadster. And I learned by owning that car, how to keep it running. It's a metaphor, by the way. I'm not shifting to auto mechanics. how do I keep my car running? It's not like I had money to hire somebody else to do it. I had to learn how to do it. And one of the things that I discovered really early on that to me still holds the mystery of how cars even bother to run was the entire system is dependent on this little space, this little tiny gap in the spark plug. And in this gap, and it's very small. In fact, you got to measure it and get that little gap just right. That open space at the tip of that plug is where the spark happens, right? And when the spark happens, everything happens in the car. I mean, all the systems in that vehicle are dependent on nothing but this little space. And I remember with pride growing up, I'm like 16 years old and maybe 17 at that point, working on the car. And one of the things that you would do whenever you would tune up your vehicle is you would set the spark plug gap. And if you set it too far apart, the spark plug wouldn't fire. And if you set it too close, it wouldn't work either. The gap had to be just right. And there's just something about that little space that holds the wonder of the engine. And I wonder if going forward, we're really called to mind that kind of mystery gap that invites us into exploration together. I almost think I would want to be in that space, right? You know what those spaces are like. You probably have those moments. Maybe it's coffee together with a friend, and the space between you as you each share a cup of coffee is like that space in the spark plug, right? That little space where you lean in close enough to where the intimacy of that moment invites something like magical to happen or wondrous to happen, and you feel the resonance of relationship in a new way. Maybe that happens to some of you, like remember back on your first date when you were far apart and then you came close together, and then all of a sudden, the sparks start to fly. There is something to this idea that out from nothing, the space, something wondrous can happen. And I simply want to propose this morning that maybe, to the author's point, I can't remember the author's name that I told you before, but that book was a little bit about thinking about maybe God is not like making things happen. God is not an entity that we try to appease in order to manipulate world events or personal events. Maybe the wonder of God is this space, this energy in between, in the gap, right? It's just that which happens when things start to come together just close enough that some wonder can emerge. I wonder too if that's what happens to Lao Tzu or Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad or any of the prophets or the mystics or anyone who tends to that gap, that draws close to the experience of life, just close enough that something new can spark and come alive for them. So that's the first thing I wanted to think about today is maybe just to help us pay attention to the potentiality of simply holding space together. And when we do come back together as a kind of a communal family, if you will, what might that look like for us to be present for each other in such a way so that we don't just get back together and say, let's grab the bucket full of wisdom that worked, pre-pandemic, or that has worked for us for a long time. Let's not just apply that bucket of wisdom, but rather let's create the opportunity for new wisdom and new insight to be constantly birthing amongst us. So that's reflection number one this morning that I wanted to share with you. And maybe in the chat, if you want, if you're posting ideas, think about where might those spaces be for you, those sort of, it's not like you're looking for answers, but where are those sort of sacred gap moments that you want to mind, tend to manage carefully, because there's some spark of life that happens inside that little space for you. So that's layer number one, okay? Layer number two for today, there's a 2-layer approach. I got to tend to my time as well, because we're going to have a visit by the president of our congregation today during announcement time. Layer number two is an old phrase that many of you know about, and it links me to the idea of sort of how does that gap work when it's a community. We know that in the early Christian communities, we're learning this as we study the way in which the early Christian communities kind of crafted their experience or their inheritance of the wisdom from Jesus in different ways. So those who are in that class on Wednesday know that each of the gospel writers were a part of a different context, a different time and place. Circumstances were different. And so each of them crafted the story of Jesus in their own way in relationship to that context. So we know that it's always been that communities come together and collectively find their way. And sometimes we then grab their collective wisdom and think it's normative for all times and places, but that's not the way to do it, right? The way to do it is to see that they spent time and energy as a collective crafting language that worked for their time, rooted in their connection to the wisdom and teachings of Jesus and the Christian tradition or any tradition. So a perfect example of that we're studying, we're using the Lord's Prayer in this study, is that each of the writers who kind of use that Lord's Prayer that we've compiled together to make the one that we try to say or recite every week, each of the writers who constructed that constructed a different kind of prayer, right? They put that prayer together a little differently to meet the concerns of their time and place. So I wanted to explore both the individual, what do individuals do, the minding of the gap, the magic that happens in these spaces that can generate something wonderful for us, but also what do we do collectively? And I'm tossed back to there's an old phrase, Elvis has left the building. Remember that one? I don't know. I never heard it live, but I know that phrase. And so that phrase is popular one. Elvis has left the building. Where did that come from? And you're going to go, oh my God, Dan, you are just grasping at straws here. But think about this for a minute, right? Elvis his music was so amazing in his time and his context, right? And if you see concerts, Elvis concerts, people are just going absolutely nuts for Elvis. And there's people in the front row like passing out. They're frothing at the mouth. I mean, the excitement over this music and this individual are just palpable in these concerts. And where that phrase comes from is that when the concert came to an end and it was time for Elvis to get off stage, the people refused. This is again a metaphor. The people refused to let the spirit of this concert go. Right? They demanded encore after encore after encore. They would not let this time end, this relationship end. They wanted to be here forever. It's like the disciples on the top of the mountain with Jesus saying, this is so awesome. Let's just stay here forever. That can't happen. So at some point, an announcer has to get on stage and literally tell the people, Elvis has left the building, so that they realize that he's not with us anymore. I love that. Oh, to be so popular. I'm sure that happens, at the end of this little time together, somebody in the house has to say, Dan has shut down the live feed, quit staring at the screen. And so the question is, with the crowd resonating with the spirit of his music, with the crowd longing that the lyrics continue to echo in their ears, with the crowd connected together, bound together as one in this experience, with a crowd that just feels the energy of Elvis Presley coursing through their veins. Did Elvis really leave the building? I don't think so. I think that is the wonder of when that little spark happens with the collective. We as a collective, even the people, us together on this little conversation this morning, we in some ways hold the spirit, the energy, the synergy, the wonder, the mystery, the resonance, the music, the song that has been sung, that we have heard in the past, right? That has left the building, but now it resides inside of our collective energy. And to somehow think in terms of how do we claim that or embrace that, not to institutionalize it as a church or a congregation, but to see that that's the glue that holds us all together, right? That heartbeat of that moment of connection to the sacred that's manifesting in each of us collectively is the thing, right? That we should think of that as church, not the institution, not the building, not the finely crafted language that we recite every week, but the energy that we still hold, that's now in our bones, in our bodies, is what church should be, is the way concert manifests itself, even though Elvis has left the building. You're probably wondering, what does Dan think about, late at night on Saturdays, that this kind of stuff comes up? But so what I'm doing with you today is mostly just wondering. I don't have any answers, but wondering those two layers, right? How are you, and please do this, how are you tending to that little open space, right, where something wonderful can journey into your own consciousness? That's that space to cherish. And then how do you see yourself as part of this throbbing crowd of humanity that can begin to manifest in and of itself the wonder of the music that once was on stage, but is now in his vehicle and gone long away, right? We bear that now. That's why this connection that we all have is so vibrant and important. And if we can, to Robin Myers, there he is, to Robin Myers' point, if we can start to reimagine that is how spirituality kind of works for us, that is how the collective works for us, if we can find new language, we can move into our faith lives together, not just simply trying to reach back and resurrect languages and images from the past, but in the energy of the experience of the present. And I really think that's the challenge we're going to face as a people coming together. All right. So those are my reflections today. But I want to send you for a moment into a piece of music with Martin, and just give you some space to ruminate on that. And this music's called "What Wondrous Love Is This?" And as you enter into this song, I want you to just pause for a moment and just kind of spend some time with those two concepts. The song "What Wondrous Love Is This?" No one knows where it came from, right? They don't know the author, as Martin notes, but the song itself manifests in different ways, in different times, and in different places. Its melody continues to linger in the in the crowd, and then the song births itself in different ways. You're going to know it from a hymn, but Simon and Garfunkel did something with it. Santana did something with it. This melody structure, right? The melody structure has left the building, but it continues to resonate in the collective. So both the individual and the collective, how does the wonder or the mystery of this kind of life gift continue to find its way? So just spend a moment with Martin today. And then after that moment, I'm going to wrap up and invite Mark Fensky to be with us today, who will bring us kind of an update on our congregational life. So enjoy this music with Martin today. Okay, hold on a minute.
Music nor the lyrics to the hymn, What Wondrous Love Is This? What we do know is that it was adapted from an Appalachian folk tune, and it is sometimes referred to as a white spiritual. One of the most beautiful musical aspects of this tune is that it is written in not a major or minor key, but in Dorian mode. And Dorian mode is actually pretty common. A couple of examples you might recognize are, first of all, Scarborough Fair, which is a medieval folk song adapted by Simon and Garfunkel, and Oye Como Va, a cha-cha written by Tito Puente and made popular by Santana. This is What Wondrous Love Is This?
Thank you, Martin, for that. Sorry about the volume there. I think the volume was a little light. Always wrestling with how to get Martin's music to come across effectively on this platform. So think about that for a bit today. Let that sort of be the way in which we close out our time together. Is, how do you allow this sort of wondrous love that sort of is a thing, just to be in these spaces that we nurture that invite us into wholeness or connection with another, or connection with the environment, or just being, that place matters. That's where the spark can happen. So lean into those, tend to them, mind them, be present for them in your own life. And then to imagine that you're not in this alone, right? You're part of a network of interconnected lives that are also manifesting and giving expression to this as well. There's beauty in that. And let's be held in that beauty, shall we? All right, I'll end to that. For those of you who are kind of a part of this Facebook feed today, Facebook Live event, we're going to transition a little bit at this point in times to, I'm obviously the clergy person at a congregation, and I'm invited that the president of the congregation, Mark, to come and kind of share an update with us on what's going on in the life of our congregation. So if you want to hang on for that ride, you can see what local churches are up to in this day and age. And then following that, we'll invite those of you who would like to join us for our digital coffee hour. So I'm going to invite Mark to the conversation and see what he's got to share today. This day and age. Hello, Mark Fensky. For those of you who would like to join us for our digital coffee. I can hear myself echoing at your end, I think.
All right, I gotta make sure I don't echo myself.
Hello, Mark Fensky. Yeah, I can still. So you check your speakers in your, what do you call it? Your, well, maybe you're coming across fine, actually.
Echo myself.
Hello, Mark Fensky.
I'm gonna change
I
this.
can still. So you check your speakers in your.
Yep.
Well, maybe you're coming across fine, actually. Or are you turning up? Maybe you should turn off the feed so you're not actually following anything on Facebook. That might help too.
Doing. Okay.
Is that better?
That's better. Sorry.
Okay. I'm having a little trouble with if you're, I don't know if your mic sensitivity, can you increase your mic sensitivity a little bit?
Tell me when it's good. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Let's try this instead.
I had a little trouble with Martin's volume too today, so it could just be that.
Is this okay?
Well, I can hear you, so it's just not super loud, but.
All right, I'll try to speak up. Usually my wife tells me to stop yelling, so.
Yeah, well, I get that. So be as loud as you can. Everybody at home, turn up the volume on your laptop so you can hear
I'll try
Mark.
to keep it relatively the same volume, so.
Yeah. And so, Mark, I'm going to turn this over to you to kind of give us an update from, your perspective on kind of where the congregation's been and where you see some of the challenges going forward are. And then if you do want to share the screen, you have the ability to do that as well. So it's sort of up to you how you want to do that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to share the screen this morning, but, obviously, we're coming up on the anniversary of being out of the sanctuary and not being able to meet in person. And one of the drawbacks of that has been that, we just don't have an opportunity to share what's going on with the congregation. The council doesn't, they're not in coffee hour physically to answer, questions that pop up here and there. And so the council thought it would be a good idea. I mean, I don't know why we didn't really think about it earlier, other than that we're all dealing with many different things that are going on in life. And but we just said, it's time to kind of bring people up to speed a little bit. And also because we are facing a bunch of significant items that we have to kind of wrestle with and juggle in the next few months. So I figured that would be a good time to bring that up with the council. And then after this, I'll pop over into the coffee hour. So if anyone has questions, and at that point, I'll be there to maybe chat with them if that's available. And then, people can always email or call if there's questions as well. But as we kind of mark the anniversary of being online, obviously a great deal of the council's energy and attention, at least early on, has been over the last number of months, has been how do we continue our main activities and functions as our saviors, which is really worship, spiritual support and education of congregants, and mission of service to others, both locally and in the worldwide. And some of that stuff has obviously had to take a much different approach. And as most of you or people who are on the live feed right now know, our worship is now by way of Sunday morning Facebook Live reflections. And then over the last few months, we've added in the drive-in worship. So there's been a lot of activity around how do we get that off the ground. And so I do want to take an opportunity just to do a shout out and to Dan and to Martin, because you guys have really pivoted, so quickly, and had to learn so much more, so many more things to do. How do you get this to work? And just amazing work that you guys have done. And that can't be easy because you both have basically people facing jobs, and that just cannot be as satisfying as what we were used to when we were able to gather on Sunday mornings. So I obviously to everyone, but our council's deep gratitude for your efforts there. And then also there's other people in the background. So on the Sunday morning drive-in, I want to make sure that we identify Bruce Feenstra and Lauren Stiles and others who have pitched in to help the technology there. April Bell, who has helped you, I know, along the way in technology to do a lot of the things that you're able to do. But we've also focused on how do we transition beyond just the worship, all the other stuff we do. And so, we have the peer-to-peer teen ministry that's being headed up by Cheryl Johnson now. And that's being done almost completely remotely. And they're starting to get a little bit of the traction and bringing the congregation along with some of their activities. So that's been fantastic. Confirmation has been, shout out to Carl Pfeiffer and Craig Lingell, who have just, been keeping that program running. Dan, I think you and your Merry Elves have been helping out with the Holy Ground Project kits that you drop to the younger children in our congregation that they can work on as a family at home. That's been awesome. And then you and Martin have been continuing on with adult Bible and book studies to kind of feed the soul there, as well as many other things that have really kind of, as you've mentioned, have been new things that we kind of would like to keep going after we're able to transition to in person. But the podcasts, the YouTube worship rituals, and kind of meditations, the guided labyrinth meditations. Again, thank you to you, the GTU students that you've kind of working with on these projects. Martin, Eileen Levan, who helped with the Taizé service that's up on YouTube. Those are all those wonderful add-ins that we've been able to at least keep a connection to the church in this obviously a real difficult time. And then of course now we've added on a new seminary student in the Ministry in Context program, Sam Ledoux, who's going to be with us for 2 semesters, which is fantastic for us, a new fresh viewpoint and someone who's questioning how to be a minister to the world. And I think that's going to be an awesome thing. It's too bad we are not in person, but we are trying to leverage as much as we can out of technology. So those are the things that have really kind of absorbed us. I think since the shelter in place kind of took place, late, I guess it was like mid-March last year. But the other stuff doesn't stop either. I mean, we've had to deal with all the plant, our facilities and plant issues, and so that's really what we're kind of, I think the spring we're really focusing on. I mean, we've been working with it in piecemeal, but there's a lot of things coming up, and I wanted the congregation to be aware of. Is number one, we have Dan and Martin going on kind of back-to-back sabbaticals. Dan's going to be taking off in I think it's early to mid-April, all the way through the end of July. And Martin's going to be finishing up he took half of his sabbatical last year, which was unfortunately, he had all these great plans and they just kind of all went up into thin air, which is unfortunate for him. But he made the most of it, took a portion of his sabbatical, and then he's going to take off July and August to complete his sabbatical time. And so obviously for the congregation, how do we fill in on those periods, the period of time that you and Martin are gone? And we have lined up Janet Katari, who's going to step into Dan's shoes mostly to kind of keep our worship going, our Sunday morning activities. But to just kind of add to that, Skip Ordway, our office manager for a number of years now, has announced that he is going to be retiring at the end of June. So we have to layer into that, how do we find a replacement or replacements for Skip? And how do we do that in a way that we're not bringing on a new person when our senior pastor is out on sabbatical? So we're working hard to kind of figure out what do we need. And, because obviously Skip's job, when I think I was on his hiring committee years ago,
Yeah.
and that job looks very different than when he first came in. So we're busy trying to come up with a job description or job descriptions, and then we'll have to start the search and the interviews to hire new people. On top of that, we are coming up to our year's end, which is always where our nominating committee for the council for next year starts to ratchet up and make phone calls because we have people going off council. So we're going to have to start that process again remotely, but we're going to be doing that. And that's another layer we have to add on over the next few months. And then we have a couple of other changes just in terms of facility, what we're wrestling with. So we're bringing on a new janitorial contractor. So we're having to get that up and running. Obviously, with not as many people that are on site, our site partners, I think Springstone is still not back to having in-person education yet, but that's something that may come on soon. We have other things going on, the wayfinding, the signage that's going to be installed very soon. We've been working on that for the better part of a year, and now it's almost coming to completion here. It's going to be installed pretty soon. We have some site security issues. If any of you have ever walked through our doors, you know that we are in dire need of upgrading.
You can always walk through our doors.
That's right. You can just walk through our doors. That's the problem. So hopefully this is not being broadcast far and wide. But
no, we fixed some of that.
We are wrestling with that. And then, of course, we have the kitchen and fellowship remodel, which, of course, is kind of ground to a halt as a result of, the permitting processes slowed down to a trickle. On the flip side, you have contractors who are probably busier than ever, and then they're having issues with supply chains and things like that. So that's it's kind of gone to a much slower pace. But that is now, we're getting through the permitting process thanks to Tom Heyman, who's really shepherding that. So we're focusing on that, and hopefully we'll get the shovel in the ground. I'm hoping by summer, but that's probably Tom's probably saying no possible way. We're hoping to get that moving before the year's end at least. And then on top of all that, as you've kind of mentioned before, is at some point there's a light at the end of the tunnel now, right? And we probably will see ourselves having to try to wrestle with when do we go back to in-person worship and kind of what that might look like. So that has actually, that mouthful right there is kind of what we talked about the last council meeting, and so that's just an awful lot of stuff that we're really kind of on our plate right now. And so a lot of that can't be done obviously without a healthy budget. And I just also want to kind of point out that we were lucky to have Chris House, who really took the initiative and put in a huge effort in getting the church PPP loan approved, and that has helped keep our budget pretty steady. We have, remarkably stayed relatively within budget this year, and we're grateful to all the congregants and others who are, remain contributing to us to be able to keep our lights on, but also to keep our worship and our program and our community activities going. obviously the list of things that we're grappling with, it comes with it a lot of dollar signs behind it. So,
Yeah.
I also use this as an opportunity to kind of pitch that, I know at the beginning of the pandemic, I was worried that we were going to see a complete, market catastrophe, and that hasn't happened, and that's been,
Mhm.
a good thing, for a number of reasons, but also one of which is that I think personally, for many of us that, who maybe aren't in those jobs that have kind of gone by the wayside, we didn't see a big downturn, and I'm hoping that those who can find their way to, to increase their giving, or at least, one time or continuously, because that will certainly help some of those things. The janitors, the office managers, I mean, these are things that were probably going to cost more than what we are currently paying. And I think
Yeah.
we just realize that we're going to be challenging our budget again on that. So again, I'm very grateful to the congregation for doing what they can, and I know we're constantly squeezing, but we do have some upcoming challenges, and hopefully we'll rise to the occasion again. So you mentioned kind of sparks, and you didn't mention that metaphor. It's funny because when you were talking about it, at first I thought you were going to say we were the spark, because when you think about it, different ways, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think in some ways we are the spark that kind of moves the engine of Christianity, and or just being Christ to the world.
Yeah.
And our little piece of the pie here in Lafayette, we're doing what we can, and the council is been the folks on the council have been amazing this year, and they're wearing like 2 or 3 hats at the same time, so they're providing a lot of spark to the engine that is our saviors right now. With a lot of stuff going on, we can definitely use some help.
Yeah.
I know there are people on council who are wearing 3 or 4 hats right now, doing different, because it's just easy. Hey, we have a volunteer, we need a volunteer. It's not easy, because we can't get up in front of the congregation on a Sunday morning and say, oh, we can use a volunteer for this. We have you, Dan, on Facebook Live in the morning and at drive-in, but we're really not capturing all of our congregants in knowing what our needs are. So I just wanted to spend the last minute or so just kind of talking a little about, if you're looking to kind of help, and a lot of these are very short-term, only a couple hour projects, we could definitely use help if you're so inclined and have the ability, those who are out there listening. Number one, the nominating committee is getting started for council members. We definitely can use additional council members. A lot of times it's easy when the nominating committee person calls you and it's like, oh my gosh, all the things I got going on at work or in family life. But we'd ask you to really consider, just taking that time. It's a little bit easier right now because, I think we're probably, for the foreseeable future, we're going to continue on Zoom. So,
Yeah.
as we've all been doing, we've been Zooming from, I think we've had people out camping, Zooming. They've been joining our council meeting from, I think we had someone from Utah last month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can just be sitting, carefully in your jammies somewhere, home. So it's you don't have to drive out at night to the church offices to join the council meeting. Chris House is going off. He's our treasurer. And so we do need to fill that. So if people have any particular skill there, that's going to be one big position that we really need to fill next year. So I'd put a plug for all those who, maybe this is the year maybe to say yes. It's not a whole lot of work, in the grand scheme of things, but it's definitely helpful to have more bodies and more minds helping us tackle the things we have to deal with.
Yeah.
Also, we mentioned Skip's, retirement. We are going to, once we have our job descriptions done, we're going to need to put together a hiring committee. And so we'll need to get a couple of people, volunteers from the congregation, who are willing to, once we get the advertisement out there, to interview candidates and make recommendations on candidates, that sort of thing. So if that's an area you think you're interested in, please let us know. Again, that'll probably be, a lot of that will be by Zoom, I imagine, until we actually can actually meet in person, and the color codes of our county allow for a little bit more in-person meeting. I know Chris has been looking for a couple of people to help with the annual financial review. That's only about a 2 or 3 hour chunk of work. I think we already have a couple people. We could use one more just to give another set of eyes. If you know how to balance a checkbook, this is a really easy thing to do. All we're doing is having you open up a month statement, a random month statement, banking statements, and looking at inflow and outflow. Does it match invoices? Does it match deposits? Just to make sure everything is looking relatively normal. That's something that all institutions should do, just to make sure that there isn't, and I don't mean this to suggest anything about anybody. We have some great people here, but unfortunately, I've been involved in some nonprofits where, and one locally here where that was not always the case. So having a financial review is very important, and I think for healthy finances for our church. So again, maybe a 2 or 3 hour thing. You can take a box home and do it on your own time. You do not have to come into the church office. We could use maybe one more person for Sam Ledoux's ministry and context kind of committee. We meet twice, once during her first semester and then once next fall during the fall semester, just to chat with her, find out how things are going, give a little bit of feedback, maybe a couple hours each meeting at most. So 2 meetings, once this semester, once next semester. So if you're inclined to join those of us who are on that committee, that would be a big help. And then I'm just going to put out a shout out for Martin. He's always looking for new voices on Sunday morning drive-in. If you're willing to read scripture and lead the prayers, he does all the work. You just supply the voice and come on out. I know he would be happy to take on any newcomers. So if you're so inclined there, but those are kind of our immediate needs in terms of kind of extra muscle, if you will, or extra people, volunteers. And I'm hoping that there might be a few out there who are, who've thinking that maybe they have a few extra hours to help with that.
That's awesome, Mark. Thanks for sharing all that. I mean, it's just great to help folks because, like you say, we've not come together like this to hear from you as the president since this all got started collectively like this. So I think the strategy now is to have you or somebody from council come like once a month, be right, to this sort of format to just give an update. And we integrate that into sort of our announcement time once a month. So you'll be back, would be my guess.
Or else I'll just tap someone else. So
well, now you've mastered the technology. I think you're going to be a natural at it.
Okay.
All right, Mark. So Mark's going to stay on the line. For those of you who've joined us on Facebook Live, we're going to bring that Facebook Live to an ending. So thanks for being a part of today. And as we bring Facebook Live to an end, we'll open up this space for those of you who want to join us for a coffee hour and give you a chance to ask Mark some questions. So we're going to keep Mark on the line. Sam Ledoux will join as well and kind of facilitate a conversation, kind of like we would after an annual meeting where you kind of ask Mark questions that you have or share some thoughts or volunteer for something even. So join us for our digital coffee hour that'll come up as soon as I end this feed. So thanks for being a part of today.